Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Elena Lewis. I'm the Federal Policy Manager on the Climate Investments team at dream.org. Welcome to our panel discussion on innovative financing mechanisms for climate resilience. Dream.org is a national organization that dreams of a world without prisons, poverty, pollution, and polarization. Ooh, let me breathe real quick. It's hot up here. I'm sorry. Dream.org's Green for All program works to ensure that as the green economy grows, communities of color benefit from good jobs, better health, and increased opportunity. We're excited for everyone to be here this morning to listen, connect, discuss the importance of climate finance and the role it will play in the clean energy transition. Dream.org shares the same vision as our keynote speaker to see that the clean energy transition is equitable. We are honored that she accepted our invitation to set the tone for today's discussion. Shalonda Baker is the Director of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the U.S. Department of Energy. Prior to her appointment, she was a professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University. She was the co-founder and, co-director of the Initiative for Energy Justice, which provides technical law policy support to communities on the front lines of climate change. Baker served as an Air Force officer prior to her honorable discharge pursuant to the existing Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. It became a vocal advocate for repeal of the policy. She earned a BS in political science from the U.S. Air Force Academy, a JD from Northeastern University, and a LLM from the University of Wisconsin. I apologize. So please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, the Honorable Shalonda Baker.
Wow, good morning, everybody. Yes, I love it. That is a very rousing good morning. I appreciate that. Thank you, Elena, for the warm welcome. Thank you, Jackie, for really leading Dream's work to ensure that the energy sector is truly green for all. And thank you all for getting up so early, including my colleague, Dr. Henry McCoy, to just come and be a part of this important conversation on climate, on energy justice, on just finance, right? Just climate finance. I'm honored to be the one kicking off your day today. So this morning I want to dedicate our time together, in which we will be addressing climate and energy justice, and a need. I want to dedicate this time to discussing a need for the generational shift in creating wealth for our communities. That's the work that I've been doing for the last 2.5 years or so, almost 3 years, at the Department of Energy, really making sure that our communities are included in this transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy, and making sure that that transition actually creates wealth, creates generational wealth for our communities. So before I dive into that important topic, I want to also extend a special congratulations to Dream's Green Business Council for being selected as one of the 10 DOE Clean Energy Coalition prize awardees. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yes. So Dream made it through not one, but 2 phases of this competition, receiving $180,000 in cash prizes. So you've already given them a round of applause, but that is truly a big deal, because this prize is focused on encouraging and recognizing coalitions that are assisting underrepresented communities. And we already know that many of those communities are not going to see the benefits of this clean energy transition without coalitions like dream.org. So it's so important for us to be on the ground. It's so important for us to continue to work in community, continue to work in coalitions. And we are so proud of the Department of Energy to be supporting that work. So just a little bit more about the work that you all are going to be, that dream.org is going to be doing for those of you who do not know. The Green Business Council will be deploying community-level projects in clean energy, energy efficiency, clean transportation, and workforce development across 10 underrepresented communities, including Denver, Detroit, Navajo County, Arizona, Lumbee River, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, and Mineral County, Nevada. So this is a big deal, and we're so proud to be a supporter of this work. And as I mentioned, without coalitions like dream.org, this energy transition will not be equitable. It won't be just. As I also said, this is what wakes me up. It's what keeps me up at night. It's the work that has motivated me every single day of my job here at the Department of Energy. And I know it's the focus of today's event. So many of you have obviously been watching the news. You've been reading all of the statutes. You've read the Inflation Reduction Act. You've poured through, right? I'm a law professor by trade, so I'm like, yes, we all read it, right? We read the law. But we also looked at the bipartisan infrastructure law. You know that Justice Wardy is all about making sure that communities that have for so long borne the burdens of our energy system are placed at the front of the line in receiving the benefits of this energy transition. We also, at the Department of Energy, are focused on making sure that folks are saving money and are actually made more resilient in the face of this climate emergency. So my office, the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, also has a mandate. So we were formed in 1978. We were formed in 1978 really in preparation for this moment. My office has a mandate to link Black and brown businesses and minority-serving institutions that serve communities of color to the billions of dollars that are now available under the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. So how much money am I talking about at the Department of Energy? We're talking about $100 billion, $100 billion with a B, that we are putting out the door right now and over the next 5 to 10 years. And every single one of those dollars now has to go through this equity filter, this equity lens, this justice lens, to make sure that we are prioritizing the communities that, again, have been left behind in the past. So this is also huge. This is also huge, and we need your help. We need your support. We also need you to hold us accountable in important ways as we do this work. So in my day-to-day work, I'm also reminded of the observations of the great economist, the notorious B.I.G., who said, more money, more problems. And how accurate he was in making that statement so many years ago. But it's true. I mean, we have all of this money, all of these resources, unprecedented amounts of resources, and we've had to rewire the way the Department of Energy works. And of course, the urgency can also delete any sort of desires for justice. So urgency to spend all of that money can cut against our need and desires for justice. But we have a unique opportunity to change how we do business, to change clean energy investments and manufacturing around the country, because we know this is about industrial development. It's not only about solar panels on rooftops. It's not only about energy efficiency. It's about major industrial investments, and we are working hard to make sure those industrial investments are also just and equitable. So we have the tools, we have the resources now at the Department of Energy, and honestly, we have the team. I'm gonna honor two people who are on my team, Shalea Morissette, who leads our Minority Business and Workforce Division. Shalea, wave your hand. Yes, yes. So she's been traveling the country, meeting with many of you. I know many of you who've gotten a chance to meet her, and Karine Talo, who's a part of my team as well. She's like, who's doing that? And so we have the team to actually be able to deliver on the promise of justice and equity, and to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act in a way that brings everyone along in this clean energy transition. As I've said before, we have to make sure that our EJ communities, those communities that have been weighed down by legacy pollution, those communities that have been divided and excluded from access to capital and resources through redlining, those communities that have continued to suffer from systemic racism and unequitable disinvestment, those communities have to be, again, at the front of the line. The executive order that the president signed on day 7 of this administration, Executive Order 14008, I still reference it because it's our North Star, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, established what we've already talked about, which is Justice 40. And Justice 40 is the unprecedented commitment that 40% of the benefits, 40% of the benefits of our investments in climate and clean energy are gonna go to frontline folks. They're gonna go to disadvantaged communities. And just because he said it in Section 223 of that order doesn't mean that it's so. So we need you again to keep us accountable in that work and know that we are working hard every single day to make sure that's real. So my office is laser focused on embedding the principles of Justice 40 throughout every single thing we do at DOE. We are laser focused on embedding justice and equity into every single thing we do, from our hiring practices to our programs that are coming out, our new programs that are being developed, to all of our policies, because we want to leave that legacy behind. We know that we're not here forever, so we're running as hard as we can to make sure this is true. So a way that we're doing that is by implementing a one-of-a-kind, first-of-its-kind effort, which is the Community Benefits Plan framework. So for the first time ever, every single applicant for DOE funding, for competitive dollars, has to put together a community benefits plan. Why is that important? Well, again, we're requiring it in all of our new money, so that $100 billion that I talked about, that's coming out through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Inflation Reduction Act. Every single application for that money has to include this plan. Community benefits plans center equity in project development. They require that developers talk about how they're going to do stakeholder engagement, and they actually do it. They talk about how they're going to deliver on Justice 40, and they actually do it. So we're talking about creating jobs. They have to talk about how they're going to partner with diverse parties, like minority businesses, underrepresented businesses, minority-serving institutions, and then do it. So that's why the community benefits plans are so important. And again, I'm going to say it again and again throughout my remarks. We need you to help us. We need you to keep us accountable, because we're sitting here in Washington, but the work is going to happen on the ground. We cannot be everywhere at once. So help us in this work. Help us make this transformative framework, which literally made some folks' heads explode when they saw it. They're like, oh my God, we now have to talk to communities. Yes, you do. You do, because you're spending federal taxpayer money. And you know, that taxpayer money comes from my mom. That's right. It comes from people who are like, have never been served in the way that they should be served by government. We're paying for half of your project cost. You absolutely have to talk to communities. You have to deliver on the commitments of this moment. But making our meaningful progress on energy justice also means that we have to rethink how we prioritize communities. So we now have the maps, you know the maps. I hope in this day you're going to be talking about those communities in detail and talking about, you know, what is lacking in some of those communities in terms of resources, but what is rich in terms of the capacity for transformation. We hope that that is a part of the conversation. Because for me, when I think about the fights that I'm having in the building, when I think about the promise of this moment, I'm reminded that the tremendous wealth in this country is a result of the extraordinary labor of Black and brown people. The tremendous wealth in this country is a result of the extraction of wealth from indigenous peoples in this country. People of color are the bedrock of this nation, and we are inextricably woven into its fabric. So we know there's a lack of capital for our diverse businesses and entrepreneurs. Black founders received less than 1.5% of about $330 billion in venture capital funding in the US. 1.5%. When we zero in on climate tech investments, the statistics are even more glaring. In 2022, US-based Black climate tech investors or founders received only 1% of all capital invested in climate tech startups. Folks, we've got to change that. That's why I want you to talk about the people. I want you to talk about the places, because we know where they are. We know what the needs are. So for US-based Black climate tech investors receiving only 1%, that's $214 million out of $21.5 billion. We have to do it differently. So I know I'm saying some rough statistics, but I'm trying to set the tone for you all so you can get to work today. Even at DOE, we know there's a problem. So our 2023 jobs report is saying the quiet part out loud. So we're recognizing that our community's representation in the energy sector is not what it needs to be. The energy workforce had a lower than average percentage of Black or African American workers. In no technology were Black or African American workers represented proportionally to their representation in the overall US workforce. The proportion of Hispanic or Latinx workers in energy, 18%, was also slightly below the national average of 19%. Folks, we have a problem. Did I mention that wealth is going to be created in this moment? If wealth is going to be created, we have to be getting the dollars that are moving through the climate and clean energy sector. We have to be a part of the workforce. I'm hoping that you'll join us in that work. So we have to call a thing a thing. We have to do the work. I want you to know that I'm so grateful for the opportunity to lead the nation's just and equitable energy transition. I want you to know that in that honor, there's a great burden, but there's such an opportunity to transform our country. Justice and equity very much form the cornerstone of the Biden-Harris administration. My office, the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, formed in 1978 with the explicit mission of serving Black and brown folks. We are committed to fighting for you all every single day at the Department of Energy. So it's a policy. It's a policy. It's not my idea, my dream. It's a policy of this administration that Black and brown people will share in the extraordinary wealth that is going to be created in this clean energy transition. So that's why we're here, to ensure that in this once-in-a-generation moment, you all are again woven into the fabric of the clean energy economy, not just as those who have had the labor extracted from them unjustly, not just as those who've had your land and resources taken unjustly, but as creators, as makers, and as innovators. So it's our opportunity, all of us born into this moment, born into this extraordinary time, to close a generational wealth gap. And I think we can do it through deep investments in minority businesses, through deep investments in our communities. So we're gonna continue to embed equity into every single thing we do at the Department of Energy, in our legacy programs, in our new programs. We're gonna continue to push to make sure that those community benefits plans are real, and that when a company tells us they're gonna do something, they actually do it. But again, we need that accountability framework. So this is our work. This is all of our work. It's not just Shalana Baker's work, Henry McCoy's work, Shalaya Morissette's work, Corrine Taylor. It is our work, y'all know that. But this is our work together, collectively. We hold a deep commitment to justice and equity. And I believe that we can do this. I really believe we can do this. So I wanna just end with a couple of highlights of ways that we are trying to move this forward, ways that you can plug in. As I mentioned, Chief Shalaya Morissette is the head of our Minority Business and Workforce Division. She hosts a monthly webinar called Ask Us Anything. So folks, Black and brown businesses, those who are doing workforce training and development programs can come into that webinar, can be a part of that. Look us up on the DOE website and plug into that opportunity. Later today, our office is hosting, in coordination with the Office of Manufacturing Energy Supply Chains, we're hosting a roundtable where we're actually gonna talk through funding opportunities in clean energy manufacturing. So there are opportunities that we're trying to make available, make you aware of, even this week. So I think that's oversubscribed. So Corrine, who waved her hand earlier, can provide more information if you do wanna be a part of that conversation. So as I end, and I hope I got you a little excited about the conversation you're about to have today. As I end, I wanna leave you with a couple thoughts. The first is you really need to lean on us. You really need to call us. You know, some of the first meetings we had at the Department of Energy people got into the department half an hour late because they're like, we could not find the front door to this building. These are Black and brown businesses. These are folks who are heads of universities that serve students of color. We couldn't find the front of this building. And you know why? Because the doors have never been open in the way that they're open now. So we need you to lean on us. We need you to knock on our doors. We need you to call us. We need you to email. We need you to be in conversation with us during this extraordinary, unprecedented moment in history. The second thing is, we need you to hold us accountable. We need you to hold us accountable. I've been on the outside before. I'm on the inside now, but I know how important it is for outside advocates to raise hell, I know how important it is for you all to collect data, to keep our receipts for us, to show whether we're winning or whether we're losing, because that will continue to allow us to elevate, to raise our game. Every single entrepreneur who's in this room, every single funder, every single innovator who's in this room leads with innovation and excellence, and we know that you're all deserving of being a part of this energy transition. So lean on us, hold us accountable, and know that we are fighting for you every single day inside the Department of Energy. Thank you so much for letting me open up this day, and have a great conversation on climate finance.
Okay. Thank you so much for that keynote. I just want to echo your sentiments about those jobs being good paying labor union jobs as a person who's worked in labor over 10 years. And so our next keynote will come from Jesse Buendia.
Buenos días todos. Buenos días todos. Vengo desde California. I'm coming straight from California on a red eye. So happy to see your shining, beautiful faces today. Mine's trying to wake up and keep up with you DC folks and all the incredible energy and vibrancy and brilliance that you bring to the table every day. I want to say it's just an honor to have Dr. Shalonda Baker here. We have been in each other's lives for a while, in and out, but I've admired her ever since she started doing this work, and the incredible moment that we are in, that we have leaders, women of color who are brilliant, who have answers, who are willing to do the work, and who are fighting every day for us in these positions. I feel so lucky that when we do this together, when we have inside-outside strategies, it's Dr. Shalonda Baker's face that we get to see on the other side. So thank you. I'm lucky because my keynote is really just me talking about how great our team is. And so I want to just recognize that Dream.org has rebranded. So our organization, you might have known us. We've been around since 2008, used to be Green for All. And we actually merged in this incredible moment last year with a number of different social enterprise ventures that were started by our founder, Van Jones, around economic empowerment issues, specifically green and green economy issues, as well as criminal justice issues, because we see all these three issues working together. We believe that our future is a future that closes prison doors and opens doors of opportunity, and that means opening doors of opportunity into the new green economy. I just want to recognize some of the incredible shining faces, because our organization, when we first started, it was because of the ARA funds, a huge opportunity. Back then, Obama was in this position of doing these huge investments and being able to link both the green investments that were coming with, again, criminal justice and anti-poverty issues. The Green Collar Jobs Initiative began. Now we actually use those terms, green collar jobs, new Green New Deal, like all of these things that started back in 2008, but has actually built a momentum, a movement behind it. And so coming here today, it's just incredible because we're doing it all at scale. When the Biden-Harris administration came in, and they actually signed the Inflation Reduction Act, $369 billion of investment. That was 4 times more than what the Obama administration was able to do. 4 times. I'm like, what were their conversations like, between the two of them? Were they like, $369 billion. What do you got on that? And I will say the difference between this moment and the moment that we were in a decade ago, and some of us, please just raise your hand if you were doing this work under the Obama administration in some capacity, federal, state, local. Were you working at a financial institution? Did you start your business? Like, you were probably at the forefront. And whatever room you were in, you might have probably been the only person that looked like you in that room at that time. And that's because they were launching something that had never been done before. And what do we have in this moment? We have an opportunity to learn from our mistakes. Because back then, what was happening is we were getting money out the door for the first time ever, but we didn't have policy that actually had the kind of Justice 40 impact. We didn't have a notion of all government approach. We're not just saying a single department or a division needs to be committed to disadvantaged. We're saying the entire government needs to be focusing on reckoning our past and being able to actually think about the impacts and how we are not going to make a mistake this time. We're not going to lose the opportunity the way that we did when we were tinkering and piloting and trying to figure out. Now we're going in. We have people like Dr. Shalonda Baker. We have people like the folks that are here with me at dream.org, and we're saying, no, this is our moment. This is our moment to completely re-envision what economic transformation looks like, especially in the communities that we come from. If you're here at all or you have roots in the South, please raise your hand. Okay. If you have roots in the West Coast, please raise your hand. If you have any roots in the Midwest, raise your hand. How about the East Coast? How about our island nations? Yes, thank you. How about Native country? Because if we're successful, we're actually going to be able to see these kinds of transformational projects, these clean energy projects, these new green economy projects in communities where we came from. And that's really important. And that's why having a diverse set of messengers who can actually speak to the communities where we're from. I mean, if you grew up the way I did, I had a single mom and I grew up in public housing and we immigrated. And I told my family I was going into a job around climate change and they were like, why? You should be an immigration lawyer. You can help our family. And to be able to say to them why the work is really important, why thinking generations ahead about my children, my children's children, what they're going to be able to inherit, what opportunities they're going to be able to have, how are they going to be able to keep their families growing and thriving, in a healthy community, but in a healthy environment, but in a healthy job, in a healthy business. When I explain these things to my family, they're like, oh, so it's just about actually us having a better quality of life. And I'm like, yeah, because you gave me what now I'm going to be able to give my child, which is an opportunity in this country. Some of us come from countries where there are no opportunities. Where they have civil war, where there are economic challenges that in a generation, those countries are fighting to struggle against. And some of us are in this country because we had that opportunity, that chance to be here. Some of us didn't have a choice to come to this country. And so, but the building blocks of this country today, from 400 years ago, they were built by people who look like us. And so to the extent that we are actually taking that moment of empowerment and saying, we built this country, we needed to serve us. We do, we needed to serve us. And what does that mean? We don't want just a job, right? We want to be the businesses that actually build those communities, that infrastructure. We know what it is to have a business that does right by us, because most of us have been living in communities where businesses have done us wrong. And so to be able to say, we want to partner with you, we don't want to just shut the stuff down, because there's a moment for that. Shutting bad stuff is incredibly important. There is still a huge, huge role for that. But to build an inclusive green economy means that you want to actually join with community and saying, what does the future look like? And if you come from poverty like I did, sometimes we don't afford ourselves the opportunity to think about what a future world looks like. A futurist? I'm like, who's that? What a privilege that they have to dream. And so I just want to say at dream.org, we want to be a home for all of those dreamers. We want to be able to connect people who have had nothing in the past, who've grown up with that level of disparity, to be able to say, we believe that you hold dreams that need to be realized. And we believe the beautiful and amazing faces of my staff that are working every day with all the legal language and sifting through the millions of different kinds of Inflation Reduction Act opportunities and understanding agency networks. We believe with a little bit of technical support, we could actually link those people, those dreams, with an actual set of real opportunities. Because the last thing I just want to say is what we cannot do is we cannot overpromise and underdeliver. The biggest challenge that we have had, and I would say the biggest lesson learned, is that sometimes dreamers, we go out and we just charge and we think big, and sometimes we might overcalculate what actually we're able to deliver. And what happens to communities who maybe in their home life have been disappointed, in their community spaces have been disappointed, with their elected officials have been disappointed because people come and promise and promise and promise and then they don't deliver. What I want to say is that we have the incredible expertise, the moment that we're in, the actual real tangible opportunities that we can make these realities, these promises actually real, and that means that we're going to see projects built with community support in the communities that are most in need, where they are actually within not a lifetime, not generations, but within a few years, we're going to get those projects online because we are going to figure out how to financially stack those things to make them work. And now that is a really fun pivot to today's panel. Woo! Climate financing. All right. Climate financing. Climate financing, like middle school teachers, I think, have a misunderstood space in the world because people don't understand what financing is. They don't understand how to get money. They hear that there's $369 billion out there. They're like, I know our communities need to get it. We have great ideas on the ground, but how is it going to work? And what it actually means is that financing is a network of different institutions, public financial systems like the agencies that we're talking about today, but networked with green banks and CDFIs and mainstream financial institutions and interveners that actually can come in and be able to provide these loans to innovators, to community development agencies, to stakeholder groups. And so we are hoping that Dream.org can spend a little bit of time demystifying what it actually means to be doing climate financing work, because what we really need to figure out is how these folks are going to be part of our team. And that means we need team members that are continuing to do the advocacy, the campaign, all of the exciting work that our team at Dream.org does in legislative and state offices across the country, but also, the space of pulling together money so it's not so hard. Because the thing that happens is that when I say underpromise, overdeliver, it's also that it's exhausting to ask for money all the time. Oh my God. Can you raise your hand if you've had to ask for money for something more than once? Okay, be like, okay, that same project, I asked for it one time. Now raise your hand if you asked for it 5 times or 10 times. Or 20 times, or if you've been in this work, you've probably just been asking for money for so long. And so what we're going to try to do is just make sure that all of our folks, meaning like under-resourced business people, under-resourced community groups, under-resourced elected officials also who are just trying to help people navigate how to get those funds, we want to try to make it easier for folks to be able to understand so that when you're putting your heart and soul into an idea and going there, you are armed with the best information possible to get those proposals from A to Z, hopefully like not in so many rounds, And so I think what's really important is that we actually are going to be building a team of these climate finance experts out there who care about the same issues that we do, who are going to want to meet us halfway, who are going to provide the technical assistance and all of the support, who are going to believe that they're part of a bigger team. And that's what's really important, is that sometimes the lessons learned from the Obama era is that all of us were so excited about that moment, and we were working so hard, and I would say we were all working in silos. Business community was not talking to community activists. Community activists were not talking to financial institutions. Financial institutions were not talking to agency leads. We were not talking together. And what I think the biggest central premise of dream.org and what we do is we want to bring these unlikely allies together because we are going to actually build that all-star team that's going to win. And that means that we are going to win. We're going to win that dream that we've been fighting for so long, for decades, some of us longer. Intergenerational activism is incredible in this country. We are going to actually build that relay team that passes the baton so fast across each other that we're going to go back to the communities where we're all from, and we're going to say, this is not an empty promise. We're going to make this into a reality, and we're going to do it with your help. So thank you. And I will pass it over to Jackie.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on, y'all. I came from a black church. Y'all got to say it a little louder than that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. That's what I like. Good morning. My name is Jackie Omotolade, and I am the Climate Investments National Director for Dream.org. I am so thrilled to see all your beautiful, diverse faces today. It just warms my heart. We are about to start our panel, but before we start our panel, one of the things that I root myself in is gratitude. And this event did not happen spontaneously. It happened because there was a rock star team who helped produce this. So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge Elena, who has done an amazing job. I also want to highlight and amplify Alexis. If you got an email, she probably drafted it. So thank you so much. We got to give a shout out to Daniela as well. Bella, I don't know where you are, but Bella, as well as like Kendall, and talk about producing material. Emily, who is not here. And then the rest, like EJ, Kyle, I don't know where Rachel, where all you guys are. John is here. So many folks have just come together to make this happen. And I say that is truly the Dream.org way. It's about bringing a whole bunch of different folks together. Sometimes to have difficult conversations, sometimes to disagree, sometimes to agree, but also always to be rooted in a place where we want to see the best and the brightest and the most inclusive and equitable outcome for everyone. And that's what we're rooting this conversation in as well. I flew in last night from New York. I was at Climate Week, and I went to a million different panels and discussions on climate financing. And you know what most of them lacked? Like folks who look like us. Exactly. So right now, right here in DC, and if you know the history of DC, you know this is a black city. We are going to have conversations about black and brown people and how we build our wealth for our communities, and we make sure that this new green economy is one that's inclusive. So without further ado, I am going to bring all of my panelists up. I don't think I can do any of them justice during my own introduction, so I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, and we're gonna have a really cool conversation. So come on up, folks. So first and foremost, I'd like to just uplift the amount of females on this panel. Definitely by design, and also just the beautiful, diverse faces, because we are the future of America, so, and the past too. But so first and foremost, I'm just going to let my panel start to introduce themselves, and we will start at the end right here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nina Young, and I'm the Director of Policy and Network at Coalition for Green Capital. Should I go into? Okay. It's really a privilege to be here this morning. I actually pivoted into the career of clean energy finance fairly recently had a decade of experience working in community and economic development. So understanding all of the resources and the skills and the folks that are necessary to make a clean energy transition is something that's truly dear to my heart. I saw the clean energy transition as an economic development opportunity. And so in my role, really thinking about what's the network of green banks, but also other partners, businesses, really looking at it as a all of society approach. So really grateful to be here and share with you all what CGC is up to in this effort and in this time. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Joan Cato. I am the Colaborativo 40 campaign director for Green Latinos. I am also a partner at Everyday Voters. So I've been consulting with Green Latinos on how to get the 7 largest Latino organizations in the United States funding, and part of that Justice 40 funding, so we get our fair share. Because like Sharonda Baker mentioned, it is upon us to go ahead and hold them accountable and to make sure that those commitments stay in our communities. Because even when you look at how Justice 40 kind of started, it was supposed to be 40% of federal grants were supposed to go to our community, not to just benefit our community. So I've been fighting the good fight for about 20 years, doing everything from campaign advocacy on the Obama campaign, on the Bernie campaign, to getting government grants. So I do grant management as well as field, phones, text, and digital. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Phoebe Romero, and I work with Clean Energy Buyers Association / Institute, and I am an equity manager for our Beyond the Megawatt program. The Beyond the Megawatt program aims to work with large corporate buyers of clean energy to embed social equity, resilience, and environmental sustainability in their transactions. A lot of clean energy is purchased by the voluntary market, which is the private sector, and so it's trying to get investments from all that money and all that wealth into communities. Prior to this, I worked with the City of Austin on their climate equity plan, and so started really trying to embed social equity as a lens in climate planning many years ago, prior to a lot of the work that's being done now by the federal government that's really helping, catapult that work. On a personal level, I'm from the South Texas Rio Grande Valley. And if you don't know, it's a border town. So I was born in Mexico, grew up in Texas, and something to know about areas like the Rio Grande Valley is that there's basically generational underinvestment. And so when we talk about climate resilience, it's really important to think about communities like the one that I grew up in and the types of already cascading effects that can occur from socioeconomic underinvestment. And so I carry that lens with me into this work, and just excited to see more funding go into those types of communities.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out to see us, hear us speak today. I'm Adora Ifebi. I'm the Senior Director of Impact at Soul Systems. We're a for-profit organization, a solar and a financier based here in DC, not too far from here. We, Soul Systems owns and develops and finances solar projects across the United States. In my role as a Senior Director of Impact, I'm leading the development and implementation of Soul Systems' infrastructure and impact approach. And what that really means is we're working to magnify or maximize impact through economic, financial, and social impact around the communities where we build our projects, in and around those communities as well, and working with organizations there. So for me, I work to, look at the communities where we're going to build our projects, who is there, what we need to do, to really show that the benefits of these projects are not just leaving those communities, but are being invested in those communities, as well as the organizations as working certain objectives that we've aligned with some of our corporate partners. Prior to Soul Systems, I was the program director for energy access at NRECA. That's the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. I started that program, led it, had about 250 cooperatives who were interested in looking for innovative ways to serve their communities. As you know, co-ops serve 92% of areas that are considered persistent poverty counties in the United States. So really, working with low-income communities as well as the rural communities that usually, in some cases, are not, again, part of the communities that are left behind. So that's really what I brought to Soul Systems, and continuing to hopefully amplify the message as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm the male. Very honored to be a part of this panel. My name is Matthew Tejada. I'm the. I have a long title that nobody cares about. I'm the senior career official for environmental justice at the Environmental Protection Agency. I've been in that position for over a decade now. I'm one of those people that gets to survive, hopefully, between administrations. And we've managed to do so for over 30 years in the EJ program at EPA. But before joining EPA, I came up in environmental justice in Houston, not in the Valley. I led an organization that continues to fight for clean air and justice in the many fence line communities around the heavily industrialized areas of the Texas Gulf Coast. And I currently have the privilege of leading the program that is implementing a total of over $3 billion that we are going to get to the communities across the United States that are on the front lines of this fight. And I'm hoping and looking forward to talking about that.
Well, thank you. Let's just give a round of applause for like this dynamic group. All awesome. So I am going to lead off with the first question, which I feel like it's the choir in this room, but I feel like the question still needs to be, the answer still needs to be documented, and we are recording. Why do we need innovative financing mechanisms in order to address climate resilient and underserved communities? And Joan, I want you to start that one off.
Well, we need that because our communities aren't seeing those funds. Even with the Justice 40 grants, even with these opportunities that everybody's been talking about, the lowest income among us, the people of color in our communities, the frontline organizations are still not seeing the value. They're still not seeing the benefits. If, like, for example, renters, the majority of our community rents, but they're unable to access the benefits from solar. Why is that, right? Like, that's a huge problem that they're not able to access those benefits. But on top of that, renters are still not able to access the benefits from electric vehicles. Because where do you charge? Most people charge at their home, right? If you charge in a commercial space, then you have to pay a higher amount to actually get your car recharged. But as renters, you don't have that same opportunity. So when folks are talking about all these opportunities being brought to our community, from an environmental justice standpoint, from a people on the ground that will see those benefits, we're still not seeing them. So that's why it's important for us to fight this fight, to actually make sure that we get the benefits that we're seeking.
Thank you. Just because solar was touched on, I'm gonna turn to you a little bit and just ask you to answer that same question as well. And then EPA, but first Adora.
Oh, okay, sure. I thought you were looking at him, but
I was worried for a minute.
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, why is innovation important, right? The definition of innovation by itself is really what tells you why we need it in communities. We know that the only constant is change. And by that, that definition, it really tells us that we need to continue to evolve. And by thinking about new ways of doing things, changing what we've done and looking at ways of changing what's not working. So for Soul Systems, for example, what we've done is consider what else could we be doing that allows us to invest in the communities where we build our projects. Is there anything new that we should be doing? And the answer is yes. And that we've looked at how do we develop craft our power purchase agreements. That's what we do. We are a large-scale utility scale developer, and our partners are corporate buyers, the Microsofts and the Googles of the world. So if they're buying solar from us, what can we do so that where we're building our projects are not being left behind? And that's when we're building an impact PPA, which means exactly what it means, is that a portion of the revenues or profits from those power purchase agreements are going back into the communities where the projects are built, or areas adjacent to those communities, depending on various internal objectives. We also look at tax equity agreements, which I'll probably go into later in more details. We can also use those mechanisms to design innovation into them and bring them into those communities as well.
just going to look to you, Phoebe, as well. And can you provide some specific examples in terms of your work and some creative or innovative approaches?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a couple of, I think things that come to mind. And so one thing that I'll set the stage with is that I just moved to DC from Austin last year. And so I was in Texas when Winter Storm Uri took place and was also working for city government. So that was an interesting intersection, right? Like seeing firsthand how the government handles these things behind the scenes, and also seeing firsthand how community organizations are much more nimble and much more connected to being able to respond on the ground. And I think that that's a very important aspect of this to work. So one of the outcomes of that was that the city said, we are going to now invest much more in what we call resilience hubs. So there are places, hopefully they'll have a community connection. From a public standpoint, it can be a recreation center or a library or school. And then in many cases, organizations are partnering with local places of worship to also create that system. A resilience hub is an area or a building that has backup power, backup water, and in often cases, they're also trying to create that into a community resource center. You can charge your phone, et cetera. And so an example that I want to highlight is that we know that, so there's an organization here called Groundswell that is working with communities to create resilience hubs. And I know that one of the projects that they're building was funded through a community impact fund done with Sol Systems and Microsoft. And so, and that is something that, they told us that would not have been done without this specific funding. So having, had that public background working in government, I know that when we ran the numbers, it's very, very expensive to build this type of infrastructure, right? And we're talking about like several buildings, right? We're not talking about like actual people's homes and weatherizing those and making it to where people don't have to leave their homes, right? And go and walk somewhere else to have access to basic needs like heating, cooling, and water. And so I think, again, the opportunity for channeling the profits that come from these clean energy projects that are, very much contributing to decarbonization, which is very important, right? Cleaner air. But at the end of the day, it's also dollars, and that can go directly to communities. And so part of my job has been trying to highlight the work that Adora and some of the big tech companies are doing, and saying we want to help communities. We want to bring some of those profits and channel them directly into communities. But the challenge is that it's still relatively niche, right? It's still
Absolutely.
large tech companies that are willing to take that step and be courageous. But there's a lot that are really just trying to make sure that their clean energy project pencils out. And, in my perspective, that's not good enough. Like decarbonization that is inequitable is still not going to solve our problems because now we have a changing climate. And so it's just very, important to try to bring that message over. And so, I think, the work that Sol Systems is doing, they're still an innovator in that, right? But if we can get many more developers and many more what we call energy customers, these corporates to ask for that and to offer that and to, say we have a commitment, then we can really move to scale. And this is without even talking about the tax benefits, right, that are coming from
Absolutely.
the federal government. And so that's why it's so important to have that connection between public and private partners, too.
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, so I did not mention in my introduction that Coalition for Green Capital is a lead applicant in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund process. And I feel like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a massive, innovative opportunity to do financing. Phoebe really hit the head on the nail talking about it from the commercial side, but from the public, nonprofit, and really thinking about the social impact. I think that will single-handedly be one of the largest opportunities because it's a non-tax credit-based program to have a national approach through the potential development of the National Green Bank, but through the community lenders to really design and think holistically about what type of financial products are necessary to serve the communities that need it the most. But there's also significant resources for community engagement and technical assistance. And I think that's the opportunity where you can think about how is private capital brought in to, how can public funds be used to leverage private capital? But then it's all of the infrastructure aspect of it. It's the social part that's where the community engagement and technical assistance comes in. Where are the resources to build out the minority businesses that have missed opportunities in the past? I love how Shalonda Baker talked about this is an industrial policy. We've seen many times in the US industrial policies being implemented at the expense of communities of color. How is this an opportunity to leverage this moment for communities of color, particularly business owners, thinking about the middle out, as Bidenomics has really been promoting. Federal funds can be used with private capital through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to really think about innovative solutions, and Coalition for Green Capital is really seeing this as a huge opportunity, and I'm really excited to see what we're capable of doing in the next couple of years.
Thank you for that. Michael, I'm going to turn to you.
Okay.
And just talk a little bit more in terms of, as a representative of the EPA, and just talk a little bit more about what the government is doing in terms of leveraging.
Sure. And to begin with, a few folks have mentioned, the investments and the importance of the investments. I want to make sure you all know, the other panelists and the folks in the room, not everyone in this administration that is working on Justice 40 thinks that investments are a benefit. They want to talk about everything other than the dollars as benefits. And for those of us like Shalonda and myself, when we're confronted with those folks, it melts our brains, right? How can you talk about benefits that don't start and end with a dollar sign? Right? There's a lot of other benefits in there, but it's the dollars, right? Who's getting the dollars? And that's a fight that's still happening. And we still need to hear and have y'all hold all of us accountable that it's about the dollars. I don't care about what other benefits you think we're working on, it's not about the dollars. The other thing that is just the reality of what's happening right now is that the timing of all of this sucks, right? There are tens of thousands of communities out there that should be accessing this that have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They've never even heard about social justice or EJ or climate justice or any of these programs. And they're the ones that need them the most. So a lot of the things that I know y'all are working on, a lot of the things that many of our programs are trying to deploy in terms of supporting more and more communities to get in the game, like that should have started, it should have started generations ago. It really should have started at least a couple of years ago. We're just now still rolling it out while the money is hitting the street, right? That sucks. And we need help to get those tens of thousands of communities in the game. The other thing we need help on that's just a reality of the timing here is, the GGRF could be game changing. The things we're going to put out in the EJ program at EPA, and I keep looking at Alex Gaio because she's actually writing one of the grants. The thing that we're putting out is going to be could be game changing. The thing that our air program is putting out, the things that Shalonda's programs are putting it out. There has been no time for us to sit down and really make those things work together, right? We are slamming money out the door as quickly as we can so that the money doesn't disappear.
Amen.
And we are hoping and relying, and I'm nervous, although hearing from y'all, it's great, it's just so comforting to hear from y'all, because we're really relying on y'all on the front lines to be able to look up and say, well, there's GGRF, here's the EJ Community Change Grant, there's the state's climate pollution reduction work going on, there's some port money over there, DOE has that thing. Those things can work in this community in this way, but in that community in a slightly different way, right? And there needs to be thousands of laboratories of authentic community innovation at how to make this work for communities, but we aren't going to we shouldn't, and we won't, and we can't figure that out from the government side. It's about supporting communities and y'all on the front lines, being ready to figure that out and make it actually work on the ground.
Can I respond to that?
Of course you can. Jump in. This is
All right. So I'm going to dig deep about like how you guys can make it more accessible
Sure.
to the average frontline organization, also to the average people of color organization. As y'all have mentioned, a lot of our organizations are applying for these grants for the first time ever, right? So we're already coming from a disadvantage. So when you're making those NOFOs, the notice for funding opportunities, when you're making those scoring rubrics, and you're making it so that you're grading it so that people with previous experience get more points than people who are applying for the first time, it automatically discriminates against our communities. We're trying to fight back from a 10-point like disadvantage on a score of like out of 100. So that's like number one, I think, about how you guys can really make it better for us, is looking at that scoring rubrics and figuring out ways that you can make it more democratized, more accessible to the average coalition, business, minority group that's looking to apply for the first time. Number two, stop having the preference for states and municipalities. Okay, states and municipalities might make sense in certain places across the country, but we all know what's happening in Florida.
Right.
We all know what's happening in some places across the country. North Dakota, South Dakota. You couldn't even get them to apply for the Solar for All opportunity within the within the GGRF. So like, stop having them be the preference and start making it so the average nonprofit can apply for these. Because we have a better connection to the community. We're on the front lines. We know how to talk to our folks. We know how to interact with folks. We're there day in and day out. So when you make it like that, or you change something at the last minute, with like even for Solar for All, you said that it was supposed to be accessible for nonprofits. But then we look at it and it's only municipalities and states that are getting access to these grants. It's disheartening because we don't have the capacity from the onset. We don't have the resources. So when we invest our resources towards making a good application, and then you change it and you only make it accessible to the states and cities, it's like, it's devastating to a nonprofit organization, right? Maybe the for-profits have the capacity to build, but a lot of our minority nonprofits don't have that either.
No,
Right?
I totally hear you. And as I said, we need y'all to continue to hold us to that. There are those of us inside of the government that are amplifying that and are fighting for that as well. I'm really proud because I used to be an applicant to the programs I now administer, and I never got one.
Exactly.
It's all over 10 years ago, so hopefully they're all shredded right now, because I would be embarrassed if my staff found the grants we used to put in. But I'm really proud that we have worked every single year since I've been running the EJ program at EPA to actually give the preference to the folks who have never gotten a grant before. Up to the point that one of our most recent grants, 95% of them went to first-time applicants that had never had a grant before. Right? That's something that we're innovating, and we're trying to show that way. Like the grant we're going to put out in October, because I used to hate, and I know how hard it is for communities to build those coalitions and then put in a grant and you wait for 9 months and you're told no, and it's like, what happened here, right?
Exactly.
So that's why we're going to have an open application period for the next year. Once we launch this next grant that's really focused on communities, right? There's going to be a year for communities to apply. We're going to have an oral presentation, right? So it's not the slick grant writers. We actually want to talk to the community folks. And if they don't score high enough, we're going to debrief them and invite them to revise their proposal and put it back in, because I don't want anybody that actually sinks the cost into creating a proposal from the community side not to get funded. People got to get funded, right? And with all this other stuff, whether Solar for All or all the other stuff, there's not that many programs still in the government that are supposed to, that by law have to go to the communities, even with Justice 40, even with the IRA saying disadvantaged communities. It's going to the cities, it's going to the states. And in these places in the country where they're not playing, the community's just left out.
Absolutely. Exactly.
But this highlights the importance of intermediaries and nonprofits, and particularly your comment about there's all of these different programs, I would encourage everyone to like do a skim of I think it's the White House handbook on the Inflation Reduction Act, and you look at hundreds of programs. There is no single entity that's giving you the master guide of how all of these are supposed to work with one another. I've spent hours and teammates of mine at CGC looking at programs in DOE and EPA and USDA, hours and hours of us talking to these agency representatives. But we see the opportunity of Coalition for Green Capital as being that intermediary to braid together these resources. I was at another conference a couple weeks ago in the Midwest talking about this, and that was like the theme of the conference is like, how do we braid together these resources? So it's incredibly vital that you have intermediaries and nonprofits that can be responsive to community needs, identify community lenders, but then bring in the commercial aspect and the folks with private capital and bring it all together. But right now, as it stands, the federal government is not taking that role to be I'm losing metaphors, but being that entity to dictate how to do it, so it's very important that there's space for organizations like Coalition for Green Capital to help facilitate that.
Yeah, and I just want to explore that like a little bit more, because I think that's a very important point you brought up, particularly when we talk about like private capital, right? Because we know, despite this huge investment from the federal government, that is still not enough, right? When you hear the trillions necessary to keep communities like ours both adapting, like mitigation and adaption, right, in terms of the climate that is changing. So if you could just speak to a little bit about leveraging private capital, private equity.
Yeah, so that's basically what the premise of green banks are, is to we use the term crowd in, but you want to bring in private investment. Right now, traditional private investors deem investments in communities or thinking about climate resilience and clean energy as very risky. And that perceived risk is a concern of repayment for their investment. But green banks have existed for over a decade and have been able to prove over and over again that the communities that need these resources the most are not as risky or have the challenges of repayment as it's perceived to be. And so we just have to continue doing that. And we have to do it at scale, and we have to do it much faster.
And just because this is an audience beyond this room, can you define green banks for us?
Oh, sorry, yes. So green banks are essentially a loan fund. I think the term bank is always a misnomer. But they're loan funds with a premise of filling in gaps within clean energy financing. And so some of them can be a nonprofit entity, and some of them are public institutions. There's quite a few development agencies within locations across the US that have expanded their authority to be deemed as green banks. But essentially, we come in and help get a project across the line. It's typically in an area where there might be some private sector interests, but they're not willing to fund the entire scope of the project, and so green banks will come in and support providing that financing. But green banks can also originate their own projects and bring in investors. And it can cover everything from affordable housing to energy efficiency to single-family rooftop solar, and then with the big push through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, looking at EV charging infrastructure for both single-family and commercial needs, and also supporting public infrastructure while you're looking at your schools, your libraries, and facilities that could also serve as resiliency hubs. So there's a lot of overlap there, and green banks have, again, operated for over 10 years and also have worked closely with community development financial institutions and credit unions. So we're seeing it as an ecosystem approach, trying to fill in where the private sector doesn't want to serve, and where also right now the federal government hasn't been making investments in these types of infrastructures for many decades. So we're really seeing ourselves as catalytic tools to bring together all of the resources necessary for a just transition.
Jackie, can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
So, from I'm a private, private investor, if you will, and the way this works, we also see the support that we provide to organizations and communities as giving them the ability to also now go on the other side and leverage federal government funds. So some of our partners that we support, like we have an organization in Baltimore right now who is going to be joining with Coalition for Green Capital to apply to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. In fact, I will be writing a letter of support, right? So I have that in my inbox. So that's kind of how it works. So the funds that we give them allows them to, it frees up capacity, frees up other resources, and they can say, we have this partnership that we've already been able to get X amount of dollars, then whatever else we apply for will allow us to get this, right? So that's kind of how we're looking at it. I know usually it's about having, the federal government funds, and then you go find the private investor who will support you. But from our perspective, we're already investing in communities using revenues from our solar projects, and funding community partners are able to use those to free up other resources they do, and also go seek more partners to work with as well.
Phoebe, is there anything you wanted to add?
So there were a couple of things I think that came up. So you mentioned risk, right? And then I think somebody maybe mentioned metrics. And I think that is one of the big challenges in trying to, I think, work with the public or private sector. And not that, metrics weren't an issue, but a lot of times it comes down to, being afraid of it not having a financial return. And there's still a lot of, I think, metrics and mechanisms to value what community resilience and energy resilience have as co-benefits, right? And so one program that I think has done a really great job is Block Power is an organization that focuses on building electrification in low-income communities. And one of the kind of pathways that they've used is they work directly through the New York criminal justice entity, and really use that lens to guide their program. And so they specifically recruit in communities where you might have returning citizens or otherwise underrepresented workers, and train them to then take on these electrification jobs. And so part of why they've gathered a lot of support is because they use a public safety lens. And it's very, it can be very expensive to create jobs that are well-paying, right, that are union. And then you also want folks to be paid to be trained, right? Like that can be a very difficult thing if you're, trying to train and you're not getting paid. And so you have that whole time where you're unpaid, and it just creates this cascading barrier. And so, I'm kind of switching the conversation a little bit, but I do want to just note that it can be very difficult to have this conversation without very specific, speaking the language of metrics and dollars, and what is this helping? What is this changing? And sometimes I think if your lens is, well, this is the right thing, and this is, a historical issue, then yeah, that can be a hard conversation to have. But I think that's something that all you need community partners for, is to really understand, okay, if I put X amount of dollars in this community, does that mean that it actually had the outcomes that we need? And so thinking about the life cycle and thinking about community-centered metrics, I think is a really important part of this work. And that just came up for me, and I know it's a little bit of a switch, but wanted to mention the need for that partnership when we're talking to the private sector. And I think the government is also very caught on metrics, and that can be a frustrating process, but we need communities to validate that.
Well, and the government, all of our data and metric and evaluation systems are completely equitable and just. So there shouldn't be a problem, right? That's that's part of why Justice 40 is struggling, right? People think this data exists in a way that's meaningful to our communities, and it doesn't.
Exactly.
The government hasn't been set. The language we need the government to speak on this is a completely new language for the government. And again, and I know it's putting the burden on everyone out there, but the government's not going to figure it out. I promise you, as somebody inside the government, we need y'all to figure it out and force us to start speaking that language.
And Phoebe, I think you just made such a good point in terms of community-centric metrics. And then also just in terms of languages, right? Because even when you think about private finance, and you talked about catalytic financing, right? Blended finance, which is, was all the rage in New York this week during Climate Week. And even risk, right? And how risk is defined in terms of like our communities, and what is the difference between like impact investing versus like return investing. Like what, right? And like what does that look like? Because those audiences, right? Those impact folks are a little bit different than the folks who are just looking in terms of returns and how they view our communities when they're thinking about the metrics of what success looks like. The languages are completely different. And so, Joan, I'm kind of looking at you because I feel like you're definitely rooted into the grassroots. And I do know that like there'll be some folks from the private world who are also both watching and in the room. And so just speaking in terms of investments in communities of color as we leverage these government fundings for additional investments that actually build Black and brown wealth. Just speak to them for a minute.
Well, obviously, the more investments we can get, the better. And the better we can track those investments, I think we're going to be better off on too. Because right now, as far as I understand, they're tracked as minority businesses. But there's a big diaspora in the minority space, right? And I'm very confident that if you broke it down by the Black businesses, the Latino businesses, the Spanish-speaking businesses, the Native American folks, like it would show that we're underrepresented in proportion to our businesses in the United States, but also to our population size. So I would love to see some kind of metrics out there about how this Justice 40 funds are actually being spent in our community. Like, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's a distinct difference between saying 40% of the money will benefit our community and 40% will go to our community. And so I'd love to see how much of that money is actually going to our community. Because, like you said, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, it's like if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. We gotta have the dollars behind what you're saying. And to get back down to it, I've been working with Green Latinos, and we're one of the largest Latino organizations in the environmental justice space. And there's a significant problem if we cannot be a prime on some of these grants, grant applications, right? There's a significant problem if Dream.org can't be a prime on some of these applications and get funded. We gotta fight for what we want. We gotta push the government for what we want. And so when I know Biden's talking about his Bidenomics, and trying to tell us how great the economy is, but if it doesn't feel great to us, you can't tell us any economic statistic that will make it great for us. So you need to help make it great for us, right? Help us get those first grants. You're the person on the inside, right? We're the people on the outside that are just trying to get in the door. We don't even know where the front door is. You know what I'm saying? So, extend us an olive branch, get us in there. If you had a roundtable that asked us, what are those issues we're having to actually apply for those grants, I'm sure plenty of us would speak to you. When you get that feedback as to why we're not getting those grants, I'm sure you said that you applied for grants, didn't get them too. We would love to hear the reasons why. And I hope it's not because our font size wasn't size 12, right? Like, we want to know some real reasons, because those metrics are what's important to our community. Those numbers about how much we're getting funding is what's important. So,
Jackie, can I add to that?
Of course you can.
So from a corporate perspective, and for any corporates out there who's interested in doing this kind of impact work, you really do have that flexibility that the government does not have in terms of how they identify communities or how you choose, how you track, how you measure, right? So because this is a one-on-one investment, where for us, for Soul Systems, for example, we're looking at where a project's going to be sited in the United States, right? The generally something like the PJM and MISO region, for example. Okay, what are those specific communities? Then we start drilling down. Who are the organizations that are there? Who meet X, Y, Z, whatever our organizational goals are, and so they just say your framework is UN Sustainable Development Goals. If you're looking for an organization that is going to be focusing on clean energy access, for example, then that's where you drill in. For example, when we started doing this the first year, when we're going to do community impact investments in our projects, we did not have any projects built already. So we started with our backyard, which is DC, and Maryland and the Philadelphia area. So the one-on-one interaction led to Groundswell, and that's who we funded specifically to do resilience hubs in Baltimore. So you know that that money is going to that organization, it's not going through an intermediary, and they're using it in the community where they said they were going to build it. And the resilience hubs are serving the communities that they say they're going to serve. Another partner we funded was BOSS, right? Black Owners of Soul Services, to help them build capacity. And it's that capacity that allow them to apply to the federal government grant they got from DOE recently. It was about I believe it's some millions of dollars that allow them to expand and also start serving other communities. So I think you have more flexibility if you're a corporate to be able to craft your own community impact organization, and you deal directly with the communities that you serve. For me, when I talk to the partners, I'm talking to them one-on-one to say, okay, every month we're checking in, or every quarter, what's it that what's happening? How are you? How else can we support you? What are you seeing? What is missing? And that we take back to our corporate partners and say, you know what? Wraparound support services are very critical in these communities. How can we expand funding wraparound support services for trainees in the clean energy workforce? Now you could support clean energy curriculum, for example, but you need wraparound support services. So I think having that flexibility, if you're a corporate and you're looking for ways to support, know that you do have that opportunity, that you'll be able to at least, act as an intermediary or fill in the gap where the federal government may be lacking, or still exploring, or still trying to understand what the gaps are.
And I would just add, just as an individual, when you think about where you bank, where your pension or where your 401k is and what they are investing in, pay attention to that, right? And if it's not what you wanted it invested in, I mean, I pulled my money out of my bank because they're not investing in decarbonization, and that's something that's very important to me, right? And I went to a smaller credit union. So you, even as an individual, have an opportunity to impact climate finance and climate investments. So we are almost at time, and so I'd like to give all the panelists an opportunity just to leave our audience with one takeaway, and we're going to start at this end with you, Michael.
Oh, no.
I know, right?
Gentlemen first. Gentlemen first. Gentlemen first.
I think what we're seeing and what we're all feeling and what has been so compellingly shared up here is the challenge that is facing our communities in this time. And I remember when somebody from the Hill first called me and said, there's going to be $5 billion in the Build Back Better, and it's only going to go to community-based organizations. And I was like, oh no. My first thought was, oh no. Because I've been giving grants for 10 years to community-based organizations. And I was looking at billions of dollars, and I was like, how many of our communities are ready for that? That was my big oh no. Like, oh no. How much time are we going to get? They wound up giving, at least the EJ program and our money, almost no time. Right? All of our money has to get out by September 30th, 2026. And I can only give grants out that last for 3 years. I can do implementation projects for the first time, but how many people can build something in 3 years, right? It is, yeah, there's a few, right? And we're gonna need you few to be ready on day one to rock and roll with that money. But those tens of thousands of communities out there, there's no time in this for them. And that's the biggest thing that I worry about in everything that is happening. And even with all of this money, like, it's not even a down payment on justice in this country, right? It's honest money, right? That little check you give to show you're serious when you're trying to buy a house, like, that's what this investment is. This is honest money on generations of getting back to the communities that have been the backbone of building our country that haven't benefited from it. But most of those communities are not ready to take charge in this system. So I really am very hopeful just from hearing from you all about where you're at and what your organizations are working on, because it is going to be so necessary. The difference in this, and it's not all going to be 100% successful, right? But any success we have at this, it's going to be because of y'all and organizations of color and the support nonprofits and everyone else actually figuring this out and making it work on the ground. So please keep fighting, and please keep lifting up your voices and holding us accountable to try to make this work for as many communities as possible.
Yeah, so for me, I think everything we've said today, starting from what Shalana Baker said, what you've said, and what I've heard from all of us here is there is power in partnerships, right? It may sound like a cliche, but there really is. And if you look back generations, you look back every movement, most of them, all start with partnerships and coalitions. So for us, that's what the thinking behind Soul Systems and how we work with the organizations we work with, whether it's coming from our corporate buyers who are partners in this journey, or the community impact, the organizations that we actually support who are doing great work in their communities. There is power in those partnerships, and I think that's what I feel is going to be help continue to move this this moment right now, move it forward. And organizations, Soul Systems has an organization called Renewables Forward. It's really a coalition of corporates who are interested in really continuing to champion this work, especially around workforce development, and that we need sorely in this moment for clean energy jobs and diversity and equity and inclusion in clean energy jobs. So really, I leave you with, form coalitions, look for like-minded partners, people who are interested, and just keep going after the federal government. I think we need to find ways to just make sure that the message is going out there. There is a lot of money out there, and they just need coalitions to actually go into the communities and work on getting that.
So one thing I wanted, because you brought up BOSS, and something that I haven't mentioned is, the importance of entrepreneurship and supporting supplier diversity. And so I think I want to end by, just shouting out Black and brown businesses. And when we talk about innovation, especially in the climate space, like I've had, the opportunity to meet folks like Navajo Power. They're a Native-owned developer, and they have a sort of side company that's called Navajo Power Home, where they give solar toolkits to folks out in Navajo Nation and allow them to cut down from using generator, because these are folks that aren't plugged into the grid, right? Like in this country, right? Not just abroad, energy poverty, and they have access to solar, and they cut down on their costs. And that is a private business that's community-centered, right? Native-owned, within the community, working for the community. And, within the BOSS Network, Solar Stewards by Dana Claire Redden really has been working on something called the Social REC, Renewable Energy Credit, working on distributed energy projects, and then selling those RECs to corporates and the like. And so innovation is really found in many of these Black and brown businesses. And so when we talk about, community engagement, a lot of times folks that own these businesses are also able to engage in the community. And I think a lot of times we don't realize that, but there's a lot of connection there. And so, just want to emphasize the importance of financing resilience through financing entrepreneurship, right, and building wealth from that standpoint as well.
All right. So he's right. A lot of our community isn't ready for these grants. Probably 95% isn't ready. Definitely not ready to be a prime. So I would say the onus is on us to get that 5 to 10% on the community that is ready to be a prime. Whether you're a business or an organization, apply to be those primes. And we also need to figure out how to bring along other organizations as secondaries to apply with, like, the Coalition for Green Capital as, like, for the GGRF, or to apply with other organizations. So you don't have to, maybe you don't have the resources, but you can figure out a way to get on that and maybe get a little bit of that funding so you could build up your infrastructure within your organization so you can be a prime in maybe a year. maybe you could be a prime in 2 years. Or you can encourage the organization that is a prime to teach you and to tell them, to help guide you, to help mentor you to become a prime. And that would be very helpful, especially if you're looking at maybe white-led ally organizations to invest in that. And I'll throw it out there, we need funding from the foundations, from the community, to help us teach our communities even how to be secondaries, right? Because we're coming from a point where we're completely new to this federal government process and to the financing mechanisms behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a great panel conversation, but I think it just highlighted the importance of having a national entity help be a coordinator, a convener, particularly around these time constraints. Pretty much all of the programs within the Inflation Reduction Act have about a provision of, 5 to 7 years, which is a really, really quick turnaround, given that we're talking about infrastructure investments, which are public-private partnerships. We didn't get into the P3 part of this conversation, but when you're working with a public-private partnership, you really need a national entity helping to coordinate, helping to figure out what are the resources, and able to stretch the money. Because the timing that the federal government has put on all of these funds, which we all understand why, they want to move the capital quickly, but it does not work at the pace in which our communities work. And so we have to figure out a way to find a middle ground. And a national entity like the Coalition for Green Capital and our aspirations of establishing a national green bank will help close that gap, because we are working within a environment, both a political environment and the actual natural environment, with the pressing needs of climate change. Almost every other day we hear about a new climate catastrophe in the country, and then at the same time we are in a fraught political environment. Most of us are here in DC and understand the uncertainties there. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I dream. I'm a dreamer, and I dream of a future where we have institutions in place that can ensure that clean energy investment or environmental related investments are truly reaching the communities that we serve, and we can only do it if we work together in collaboration. So thank you for the invitation to speak, and I look forward to working with you all, because we all need to work together to make this happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for coming. So just to, once again, let's definitely give a round of applause to each and every one who was here. Thank you so much. And Michael, I'm going to give a shout out to you too, because I know sometimes as a government folks, we like to beat up on government. But you came, you brought it, and and I'm just so appreciative of you making the time to just come and be a part of this very important conversation. And I am briefly going to pass the mic back to Jesse for some closing remarks. Oh, is it audience Q&A now? Oh, it is? Oh, it is. Oh, we're not done. See?
I can take the.
Okay.
I can walk it.
Do we have any questions?
I'm gonna say somebody on this half. Raise your hand. Here we go.
Hi, thank you so much for the conversation. Really useful. My name is Meron. I'm from the Bipartisan Policy Center. I was really interested in understanding the energy community definitions that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act and how those kind of influence financing decisions.
Ooh, the energy communities. We have not, boy, I think this is still working, right? Thank you, Jess. I'm going to admit I have not kept essentially involved in the energy community stuff as I would like to have been. They don't meet at midnight, so I can't make their meetings. I will say, though, the very legitimate concern from the EJ side, from the very beginning of the energy communities conversation, has been which communities, right? And not that communities that have been dealing with generations of being dumped upon and disinvested in and oppressed aren't trying to keep other communities from turning into that. But there was obviously a very clear equity concern about shifting the focus away from the communities that rightfully should be first in line because of their histories of disinvestment. And I don't remember exactly where energy communities has landed, but we have been involved, and a number of the EJ leaders have been involved. And from what I've seen from our colleagues at the White House and other places, they have heard and responded to those concerns to make sure that we don't shift focus away from the communities whose histories of disinvestment and relationships to energy and equity really should prioritize their needs.
Somebody in the front of the room, I invite you to ask a question.
With all of the kind of short... Can you introduce yourself? Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm Mara Susana Sid with Strategic Growth Council in California. Thinking about the coalition opportunities, the partnerships, the amount of investments that are coming in at a rapid pace, what are some of the mechanisms that are being built into these funding structures, these collaborative structures, where we can really support the innovation and not have punitive structures in place? That if something is kind of getting tricky or maybe failing, that we're not really creating a structure of really disallowing those investments to continue, but really providing opportunities for support, right? So how are we actually building that structure so it's not in a punitive manner where we're not going to disallow something to happen in a different community? So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense from our perspective. And again, I come back on the private sector, right? So again, flexibility. So when we fund community organizations, community partners, we come from the position that we are not going to tell them what to do with those funds. Mm-hmm. Granted, we have our mission, we have our objectives, and we want the projects to fall within that realm of whatever our mission is, which really is energy access, climate change, habitat, environment, right? That thing. We're not going to go hire doctors or support an organization that's going to hire doctors or build hospitals. Granted, there is a need there, but that's not within our toolbox. So once we establish those parameters and then we seek organizations, for example, Groundswell, I'll use them again, and then some partners that we funded for energy efficiency. We said, this is what we're interested in, these are our objectives. And they'll say, well, this is what we need in the community that we serve. A resilient sub is going to support this community in Baltimore where there's a 40% of the community lives below the area, the poverty median, or outage, problems with power outages and things like that. Or you have community housing partners in Blacksburg, Virginia, tells us, well, there's the only affordable housing in the community, and we want to help set them on a path to solar. That fits into our mission, but they tell us the project, and we work with them to fund them. So we're not coming in with we know what's best for you. And then the way that I work on it is, I used to work, I started out my role, my time in the energy space working for DOE. So I understand, I've managed, grants, I worked at RPE. So I know that what those reporting structures can do. I've also been on the other side applying for grants myself, and it's tedious. So you're not going to, I don't come at it with that perspective because, again, it allows us flexibility. And what I do is one-on-one. I'd like to know what you're doing, granted, because our corporates also want to know. But we're coming at it from the reporting that we ask of them is really a way for us to improve or also understand where else support is needed, right? What are they doing? But it's not a way that, well, you did not meet this metric, then we don't give you money anymore. Not at all. So again, there is flexibility, but it all really depends for our, from where you're coming from the private sector, we can really say this is what we want to do. And then we also understand that some organizations may, I would say, things happen, right? You may have an organization that either loses their CEO and they're scrambling for funds and things happen. So again, just depends on the lens and where you're coming from.
My name is Blair Bolden. I'm with Banyan Infrastructure, and I'd like to ask, there's going to be a lot of financiers and community lenders crowding the space. How do we get them to accelerate so that there won't be just one or two innovative funds?
I feel like everyone's looking
Yeah.
at me.
I was like, that sounds like CCIA to me.
Yeah, we're looking at you. We don't want to say anything.
So, okay, so I'm gonna tell you where my brain is like we're in the throes of applying to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We actually literally have 22 days left until they're due, and I would say right now, pre-application things are moving, but the minute October 12th hits, there is time. There's so much time for any type of institutional investor to start to talk to organizations like Coalition for Green Capital and other coalitions that are also pursuing the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, because we can start to set the foundation for what it's going to look like once we get the funding from EPA. It's a little uncertain right now because we don't know how EPA is going to make the allocation, but once the funds are flowing, then I think investors will just be ready to jump in on projects. But between, after October 12th and then, March of 2024, we're going to get a sense of who are going to be the awardees. There's opportunities to start to have conversations about the investment profiles, the different types of projects because EPA has made it very explicit of the types of projects that we are eligible to invest in. And so, we can lay the groundwork over the next 6 months or so. And I can give you our contact information. But it's really about finding the different coalitions that are going to be getting these federal funds. And then I don't want to carry on forever, but the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is one of many funds. DOE, as Shalonda had mentioned, I think she said $100 billion. So within that $100 billion, there are smaller funds that Coalition for Green Capital is already talking with some of our partners about, and then we're going to need private investors there. So it's really about starting the conversation.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, just in terms of thinking of like on the private financial institutions on their side, right? Like there definitely is a movement, albeit small, to understand that like climate investments need to be a part of like their portfolio, as well as like racial equity investments, right? Which are different types of that. But there are a lot more portfolio managers and private financial institutions, like the big ones, not the ones who have always been doing it, right? But some of the big players in the space who are starting to have those conversations about like how are they changing their portfolios and innovating. And when you're in the private finance space, right, your career is made on like how much money you can bring in for your investors, right? And now there is that opportunity with like GGRF, with like the planet that is obviously changing, to do some very innovative things within even private investments to really make a name for yourself. And that is what most portfolio managers are trying to do. So being conservative in terms of risk, right, but also redefining what risk means. And I'm gonna geek out on risk because that's my jam, but I won't here. But I think it is going to be. I mean, particularly with this influx of federal funds, now like the fire has truly been lit, and the planet that is changing, right, and pretty much all private businesses have to rethink, think about like the insurance market, right? Rethink risk, rethink how they are currently doing business. So I think the change is happening, and innovation will continue to occur.
And I'll just say one thing just to add to Nina, what they said here, at least what I heard Matthew say and Nina say. What I heard both of you guys say is that we need ecosystem builders. And so I think what federal government is asking us to do is to help build that ecosystem. And so we are going to have 2 more questions here, and then we'll have a closeout. But there is a significant period of time that it's really just for you guys to build relationship with each other, because the more that EPA, they don't have 180-degree visibility on everything that's happening. And so sometimes they're reading applications for the first time, like the one that Nina's going to be putting together, and they're identifying all the people who have said, we want to lean into this moment to try to make climate financing happen for disadvantaged communities. Make sure your name is on one of those lists, because it will help the EPA make better decisions about how to serve the country and meet the statute, but you need to proactively put your name forward into that.
And we honestly, I mean, and to your question, to your response as well, like we need that, right? Because we all know for every one of our organizations out there that's authentically trying to do it, there's 100 prospectors just trying to get this money for illegitimate reasons, right? And that's one of our other biggest concerns is, like we from the government side, trying to set the rules in a way where we can weed those folks out, but we're not going to be able to do that in every instance. We're not going to be able to do that probably in most instances, and that's a real challenge for us to be able to divine which are the authentic ones, and can we even like push aside the other ones that are inauthentic in each one of these competitions?
Yes, and continuing to be in conversation, I think, right? To pull those folks out. I have somebody who is not one of those people, but an amazing person here who's been doing this work for generations.
Oh, thank you. I'm just going to stand because I wanted to address your question about community lenders. I'm Annie Donovan. I'm the CEO of RASA Development Fund. I think I might be the only CDFI in the room. Oh, Everett's here. Hi, Everett. Everett Sands from Lendistry. Okay, so there's 2 of us in the room. And I just want to say that I really resonated with your story this morning because I was one of those people in the Obama administration. I came in for a year on this thing called an IPA. I basically went on loan. And I went in through CEQ, and I was working in the Domestic Policy Council, and there was nobody in CEQ with my background, because I've been in the community development sector, CDFI sector for 30 years. And there was nobody like me in the sense that nobody understood what I was talking about. So it is one of those moments like 10 years forward. And that's when my eyes got open to, oh, this is an amazing world and CDFIs need to be there. And there was no beaten path. And 10 years later, there's still not really a beaten path. There's a few who have gone into this. And so I think we just have to continue. We have to really make use of this time between now and March and July when the money hits the street to start getting to know each other. Because I can tell you in the CDFI sector right now, everybody is pouring, everybody is activated. And they're pouring over it, and they're trying to figure this stuff out, and they're creating pipelines. So this $27 billion has gotten everybody's attention. So I think we just, as you said, we just have to work on building the ecosystem, because we've been all about, I jam on risk all the time. I just love that you said perceived risk versus actual risk, right? And CDFIs have proven that you know what our loss rate is? We have $450 billion in assets under management. You know how much money we lose? Like next to nothing. And we focus 70 to 80% of our investments are in disadvantaged communities. The risk thing is not right. It's not right. So that all that is to say that I feel it coming. We're gonna connect.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this amazing panel. Anthony Kinslow II, founder and CEO of Gemini Energy Solutions, and also a founding member of the Business Council with my fellow cohorts right here. Oh, I'm sorry, I should stand. Apologies. So one of the things when I think about money, and we've talked a lot about getting the money to where it belongs, is once the money gets there in the actual implementation. And all of us are all about implementation. And one of the things we've been seeing in our projects is supply chain issues, right? Switch gears, which are essential for microgrids. Anytime you want to bring solar, battery storage, charging stations, all this together, you need a switch gear, and it's 6 to 9 months, a year out. So we're talking about all this money coming down, but the manufacturing and the equipment cannot keep pace with that either. And so my question is, are y'all thinking about that? Is the federal government thinking about how to prioritize these communities in the shipment of equipment? Is, from a financial standpoint, the extra cost premium to maybe be put in front in manufacturing, right? Are y'all considering that side of the implementation when you think about the money flow?
Well, I'd like to say the government is thinking about it. We have the, I mean, I'd like to say so, because there is the domestic content adder, right? That's there. There is the manufacturing that is happening. So at least there is a thought behind it. There is a thought that we need that so that we can keep up with the pace of, this whole everything. There's so much happening at the same time. So now, what happens with the thought? Again, I don't know. So I'll turn it over to you.
This is going to be maybe the least candid answer I give, because it would really be weird for the thing I finally say that gets me fired to happen in this administration. It's going to be tough. And the entire system that is being constructed on the fly right now cannot contemplate what that reality is going to look like in our communities. And there is a lot of truth and learning that needs to be provided from the communities very quickly to folks in leadership. We've got these requirements. We've got this thing that literally keeps us up at night called BABA, the Buy American, Build American requirements, is going to eat our lunches. Right? Yeah. And we don't even know what to say about it yet, because we haven't put the money out on the street to actually hear from the folks that are going to use it, what that means, right? What does the actual market tell us when we do it? And that's going to be another area that, as we wade into deploying these funds without having had the opportunity to pilot them, without having had the opportunity to sit down for a couple years and build the coalitions and build the systems and test things out before we deploy them, none of that's happening, right? We're going national scale on day one and just chunking it out there. And those sorts of realities, even if we can get through all of the other things that we're trying to fight our way through, from competition and eligibility and how do we move the money and who's ready, the actual implementation reality of making it work, I don't think anybody can truthfully say they know how that's going to work yet, right? But we do know it's going to be hardest in our communities, right? It's going to be hardest for us to figure it out in the projects taking place in the communities that need it to happen the most. And I think that takes us back to, right, needing national organizations, needing partners, needing coalitions to show up and to form up in authentic ways to support those projects and support those communities, because we're going to have to fight our way through that from all directions.
I was convinced to add one more question before closeout, and so, I was like, wait, me.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. My name is Arandi Treviño. I come from Houston, Texas, and I am the founder of the Raíces Collaborative, which is focused on community outreach, government relations, and communications, so we can handle campaigns, social campaigns, in a holistic manner. And one thing that I wanted to point out, based off of the comments on risk versus perceived risk, I know, and I also felt the same way as you did, Matt, when you thought, when all this money came down. I freaked out. I was like, is nobody else panicking right now? Because I'm panicking. I don't know what people are going to do. And so, yes, there's a lack of capacity right now, but I also want to point out that there's a difference between being qualified or being, having the right qualifications and being capable. Because a lot of people in our community is capable of doing the jobs that we need done. and they would love to have a job that can open up doors to how the government works, how the funding works, and really what that's going to take is a little bit of training and also a little bit of us saying, you know what, realizing, okay, maybe I'm not ready for this moment, but sort of pushing ourselves into those leadership positions if we know that, okay, I have capacity that I can then embark on somebody else. Because a lot of our positions, I think, have been sort of structured as only certain titles have value, or only certain jobs have value. But really, if you're depending on someone else to do your job, they also have value, right? Everybody down the line has value. So I think that going back to that concept of creating an ecosystem, we need to focus. So I'm a gardener. Sorry, I'm like going on, but I just want to I think this is important because, so in the garden, I think about the ecosystem, right? Diversity, it's the same things in society. What do you want? Diversity, you want no pesticides, you don't want chemicals, right? And you kind of have to let it do its own thing, but you want to put the right inputs in, right? So that you get the right outputs. So I just want to kind of reach out to everybody and say that I'm open to connecting on how can we do that, right? How can we identify people who are capable and maybe they only graduated high school, but would be an amazing organizer or an amazing strategist. And we need to be able to say, okay, maybe I had to go to law school to get certain opportunities. That's okay. Other people don't have to do all of that if it's not necessary. So that's all I say. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Kiran Jaguna. I'm with Blue Dot Engineering, an engineering services company. Anyway, I was wondering, are there formal programs, because one of you mentioned mentorship, primes mentoring, prime contractors mentoring, I don't know, subcontractors. Are there formal programs for this, or is it more like an organic thing that emerges?
Okay, I can add to that. So there are that are emerging. One, the first one I would like to highlight is ACORE has an Accelerate program that we're, small, first time or startup organizations can apply into this Accelerate program, and then already existing, this, I guess I'll say, people who are already established in the industry can mentor them and guide them through the process. So that's one, and they just graduated one cohort and they started the second one again. So I think this is ideally supposed to be annual, and they also did win a funding from the federal government to support this as well. Now, I mentioned BOSS again. They have another one that they won $6 million from DOE to set up kind of I guess I'll call it a mentorship type business startup program. They're starting the first outreach in North Carolina in the South. So yeah, these things do exist. It's just, it's, outside of the, I guess, the standard networking and allies, there are these formal organizations that are helping to mentor and bring in new businesses to the fold.
And then just two resources. If you're a community-based organization and you're interested in learning more about federal as well as other funding to support your work and grow your capacity to be able to engage in the Inflation Reduction Act, we do have the Green Spotlight, which is a newsletter that on a monthly basis will send you information related to all of those opportunities. On the business side, our business network is also our council and Dream.org. We're launching a business network. We also have a newsletter with these kinds of opportunities laid out in them, and so we invite you guys. We will follow up with all these resources afterwards, after today's event, but we'll make sure that you have them so that you can actually get that information on a timely basis. I ate in a little bit to my closing, so I'm actually going to use this time to just invite you. We have a little bit of time for coffee and networking, but I want to challenge you to talk to somebody who's actually not in your sector. And so in order to actually identify the sectors, I will be announcing them, and please stand up. And for the rest of you, eyeball somebody from each sector that you're going to talk to before you head out today. So I'm just going to start with, if you are in the advocacy, policy, or community engagement space, if you could just stand up. You guys should stand up too if you identify in that category. Okay, great. Fantastic, great, fine. All right, everyone ID these people so you can talk to them. All right, if you are in the private sector entrepreneurship space, please stand up. And if you are also in this over here.
That's me.
Okay, so is everyone eyeballing who they're going to go talk to? Okay. All right, and if you're in local, state, or federal government, that sector, could you please stand up? Okay, great. And if you're a financial institution, that probably feels like they cross all of those sectors in some way, but could you please stand up? Pounce on them, guys, just pounce. And then if CGC could also stand up for that.
Okay, yes.
Okay, all right, it's a really timely moment. I just want to encourage you guys to know that, again, there's a call to action right now to build these ecosystems, but we're on a timeline, meaning we need to actually create visibility around how these ecosystems connect. So I encourage you to be able to actually speak to somebody from a different sector, talk to your financial institutions, and talk to the staff at dream.org so that we can actually meet this enormously historical precedent and really get our communities to be at the front of the line and not the back of the line for the first time ever, I think, in history. And so thank you, everyone, and thank you for this beautiful panel, and thank you to Jackie and her team for putting them together. They are here as a resource to you all and to all agencies to try to demystify what is climate investments and climate financing. So thank you. Goodbye.